There is a number the Australian ute industry does not want you to hear. In the first half of 2026, 4x4 ute sales fell more than 11%. Private buyers, the ones paying with their own money instead of a fleet card, pulled back almost 20%. And right now, across dealer lots in every state, 8 specific utes are being quietly discounted, discontinued, or walked away from while the salespeople standing next to them act like nothing has changed. This is not an end of financial year sale. It is not a seasonal clearance. What is happening to these 8 utes is the result of a structural shift in the Australian market, one that has been building for 3 years and that most buyers are never told about at the point of sale. We are counting down from 8 to 1. Number 1 will change the way you think about the ute market for good. There is no paid promotion in this video. Every figure comes from VFACTS data, manufacturer statements, and industry reporting. It is not what the dealership wants you to know, and the era you think you are still in has already ended. For the better part of a decade, the ute was the safest bet in the Australian new car market. Tradies bought them because they had to. Families bought them because they wanted to. Fleets bought them because the resale was bulletproof. In 2025, the 4x4 segment posted its highest result on record, more than 215,000 units. That was the peak, because underneath that headline number, something else was already moving. Chinese brands were arriving with plug-in hybrids that undercut established diesel models by tens of thousands of dollars. Diesel prices were climbing past $2 a liter. New emissions targets were tightening on exactly the kind of heavy, high-output vehicle a ute is built to be. And buyers who had once queued for these vehicles were starting to ask a very different question. Is this still the smart purchase it used to be? By the middle of 2026, for 8 specific models, the market had already answered no. Before we get into it, hit subscribe, because we cover the Australian ute and SUV market every week, and this episode changes how you should be negotiating right now. Let's start at number 8. Number 8 is the LDV T60. For years, this was the value pick, the ute that let LDV punch above its price bracket and build a genuine following among tradies and grey nomads. It sold over 4,000 examples in 2025 alone, LDV's bestseller by a wide margin. But look at what LDV has done to its own lineup. In 2025, the brand launched the Terron 9, a bigger, more powerful ute that sits directly above the T60 and now carries the brand's flagship ambitions. Then, LDV cut the drive-away price of the T60 by $6,000, making it the cheapest dual cab on sale in the country. And a new generation model, badged the T70 in some markets, is already appearing in Australian government certification paperwork, expected as early as late 2026. Here is what that discount conceals. LDV is not clearing stock because buyers stopped wanting the T60. LDV is clearing stock because its own newer, pricier sibling has taken over the marketing spend, and a full replacement is already queued up behind it. If you are looking at T60 stock today, the $6,000 cut looks like a gift. What it does not tell you is that you would be buying the outgoing half of a 2-tier lineup the manufacturer itself has already moved past. Number 7 is the SsangYong Musso, now technically badged the KGM SsangYong Musso after the brand's global rename. This one rarely gets talked about, and that silence is part of the story. The Musso occupies the bottom of the ute market, priced from around $42,500 drive away, competing on value alone against a wave of newer Chinese rivals offering more technology for similar money. The rebrand from SsangYong to KGM was framed as a fresh start. In practice, it gave the brand a new name to put on the same aging product while it works out its next move. There is no confirmed timeline for a next-generation Musso in Australia. What the badge change buys is time, and time is not something a nameplate at the bottom of a shrinking segment has a lot of. The Musso you can buy today is genuinely cheap. What the price does not reflect is a parent company still finding its footing after a corporate rename, competing against Chinese brands that are updating their utes on a near-yearly cycle. Number 6 is the Mahindra pickup. If you have never seriously considered this one, that is exactly the point. Its underlying design dates back to 2007, incrementally facelifted ever since, and it remains one of the oldest ute architectures sold in this country. It was priced from under $38,000 drive-away, which made it a genuine budget alternative for years. The problem is that budget position used to be uncontested. It is not anymore. The LDV T60 at $6,000 off. The entry-level Chinese utes flooding in through 2026, and even used late model Rangers and Hiluxes now compete directly on that same monthly repayment. A 2-decade-old platform cannot answer that with a facelift. In the end, it could not answer it at all. The pickup has been discontinued in Australia, pulled from the market because it could no longer meet tightening safety standards. What takes its place is a next-generation model still in development, which means right now there is no new Mahindra ute on a showroom floor anywhere in the country. Number 5 is the Nissan Navara. This one is not a story of failure, it is a story of a changeover, and changeovers are where dealers make their money on the way out. The outgoing D23 generation Navara has been sold in this country in various forms since 2015, and it is now being cleared to make way for an entirely new 4th generation model, built on the same underlying architecture as the Mitsubishi Triton, arriving in showrooms through 2026. That is a significant shift. For the first time, Nissan's ute is not developed in-house from the ground up. Here is the structural problem that changeover reveals. Every outgoing model year, Navara currently discounted on a dealer lot, is the last of a lineage that will not be built again. Parts, servicing, and resale for that older platform will increasingly compete against a new generation wearing the same badge but sharing almost nothing mechanically underneath. The discount is real. What it is discounting is a vehicle whose future support pathway now runs through an entirely different platform to the one you would be driving away in. We are halfway through this list, and the next 4 are the ones that actually change how you negotiate. If you have not subscribed yet, now is the moment, because number 1 is the story almost nobody in this segment is willing to say out loud. Number 4 is the Toyota Land Cruiser 70 series. This one lands differently because of the badge attached to it. Toyota does not quietly let a nameplate collapse. It has led the Australian new car market for 24 consecutive years. So when Land Cruiser 70 series ute sales fall 65.5% year-on-year through the first half of 2026, that is not a rounding error. That is a signal. Part of the story is Toyota's own broader supply constraints in 2026, with total brand deliveries down close to a quarter year-on-year. But the 70 series occupies a very specific niche, the old-school, live-axle, purpose-built workhorse for mining, agriculture, and remote operators. And in late 2025, Ford launched the Ranger Super Duty directly into that same space, a heavy-duty, higher payload variant built for exactly the buyers who once had no alternative to the 70 series. Here is the structural problem that decline reveals. The 70 series was never competing on comfort or technology. Its entire case was capability nobody else offered. Once a mainstream rival built a genuine alternative, the one advantage the 70 series had left stopped being unique. A discount on this vehicle today is a discount on a niche that used to be uncontested and no longer is. Number 3 is the Volkswagen Amarok. A decade ago, Volkswagen was a genuine mainstream force in this country. In the years since, the brand has fallen 16.8% in 2024 and a further 20.6% in 2025, a sustained multi-year retreat. The Amarok sits at the center of how Volkswagen is responding to that decline, and the response tells you everything. Volkswagen has quietly pulled the entry-level diesel Amarok from retail and small fleet sale altogether, keeping it available only as managed fleet volume, while shifting the mainstream lineup toward V6 power and pushing average pricing higher. On paper, that looks like a premium repositioning. In practice, it means the affordable entry point that used to bring buyers into the Amarok range no longer exists for a private buyer walking into a showroom. Here is the structural problem that reveals. A brand in retreat cannot simultaneously raise its average price and expect to hold its market share. The Amarok you can walk in and buy today. Skews V6, skews expensive, and sits inside a brand that has spent 2 straight years losing ground to the very Chinese and Japanese rivals it is now pricing itself further away from. Number 2 is the Toyota Hilux, and this one will surprise people because the Hilux is still one of the most trusted names in the country. It does not need an introduction. Yet, in May 2026 alone, Hilux deliveries fell 19.1% year-on-year, even as the model clawed back some ground month on month. For the first time in years, hybrid SUVs have occasionally outsold the dual-cab ute segment leaders in a single month, a shift almost nobody predicted 3 years ago. Here is the structural problem the Hilux reveals. This is not a vehicle in crisis. It is a vehicle whose own manufacturer is watching buyer appetite drift sideways into hybrid SUVs. At the exact moment, diesel prices are climbing and emissions rules are tightening. The Hilux remains an excellent ute. What its sales chart shows is that even the most trusted badge in the segment is no longer immune to buyers reconsidering whether they need a ute at all. If you are cross-shopping a Hilux right now, you have more room to negotiate than the badge on the grille would suggest. And that brings us to number 1. Number 1 is the Ford Ranger. And before you push back, this needs to be heard clearly. The Ranger is not a failing vehicle. It has been Australia's best-selling vehicle of any kind for 3 consecutive years, and in June 2026, it still accounted for the largest single share of Ford's total local sales. Nobody is arguing the Ranger is in trouble the way the 70 Series or the Amarok are, but here is what the incentive sheet says. Buyers of the updated Ranger lineup are currently being offered $3,000 off the negotiated price plus 5 free services, on top of a separate $10,000 cut to the Ranger plug-in hybrid and a $5,000 fuel card layered across the run-out diesel range. That is not the incentive structure of a vehicle that does not need to try. The Ranger sits at number 1 on this list, not because of what it is, but because of what that stack of discounts reveals. The Ranger's plug-in hybrid has been comprehensively outsold by the BYD Shark 6 since launch, undercut further by the GWM Canon Alpha, which now starts thousands of dollars below Ford's own hybrid flagship. New vehicle emissions targets tighten further in 2027, squeezing exactly the 4-cylinder and V6 diesel engines the Ranger's volume is built on. And Ford's own local engineers have publicly acknowledged that Chinese rivals are now closing in fast enough to matter. The Ranger is the number 1 entry on this list because it is the clearest, most visible proof that the entire ute market has tipped from a seller's market to a buyer's market. If the country's best-selling vehicle needs a $10,000 incentive to hold its position, every other ute on this list needed one to survive. So, what ties these 8 together? 3 things. The first is competition. This is not the Australian ute market of 2020. Chinese brands now sit inside the top 20 selling marques in this country, and every one of the 8 vehicles on this list is feeling that pressure show up directly in its sales chart. The second is positioning drift. Every ute here occupies a space that has been compressed, either by cheaper Chinese alternatives from below, by a manufacturer's own newer sibling model from above, or by hybrid SUVs pulling buyers sideways out of the segment entirely. The T60 squeezed by the Terran 9, the 70 Series squeezed by the Ranger Super Duty, the Hilux squeezed by the wave of hybrid SUVs. A ute can be excellent and still be standing in the wrong spot when the market shifts underneath it. The third is the question no dealership will answer unprompted. Every discount on every one of these 8 vehicles exists for a reason, and the reason is never a coincidence. 3 things to take with you. If you are shopping right now, research the resale trajectory of the model before you research the spec sheet, because the drive-away price was never the real cost. The real cost is the gap between what you pay and what you recover. If you already own one of these 8, keep an eye on the secondary market, because knowing where your ute sits is the difference between reacting late and planning early. And if you are standing in a showroom wondering what your actual negotiating position is, ask one question. How many of this model have you delivered in the last 3 months? The answer will tell you more than the brochure ever will. This market has changed, and the buyers who understand that walk in differently. Subscribe for more breakdowns of the Australian ute and SUV market every week, and drop a comment below with which of these 8 surprised you the most.